It is not hypothetical. It is real. The Baltimore Ravens have agreed to terms with Trey Hendrickson on a 4-year, $112 million deal. The Ravens wanted this to work. They wanted Maxx Crosby to be on their team.
Yeah, the Ravens should really have to explain themselves.
The Ravens were minutes away from landing Maxx Crosby in a blockbuster trade. Then, suddenly the deal collapsed. And just hours later, Baltimore handed Trey Hendrickson a shocking $112 million contract. Coincidence? Or something much bigger happening behind the scenes? Because when you break down the timeline, the negotiations, and the reactions around the league, the real story starts to look very different. For several days, insiders around the league reported that Baltimore was deep in negotiations to acquire Maxx Crosby. This wasn't a casual conversation or a feel-out phone call. The talks were serious. According to multiple league sources, the Ravens were prepared to send 2 first-round picks to Las Vegas in exchange for one of the NFL's most feared edge rushers. For a defense that already had championship expectations, adding Crosby could have completely transformed their front seven. The logic behind the move made sense. Baltimore has been building around an elite roster and a championship window that revolves around Lamar Jackson. When a team believes it's close to a Super Bowl, the front office often becomes aggressive. Elite pass rushers are the type of players that can completely change playoff games. Pressure off the edge disrupts quarterbacks, forces mistakes, and creates game-changing moments. So from the outside, this deal looked like a classic win-now move. And for a moment, it appeared that both sides genuinely wanted it to happen.
To that, I would say the Ravens wanted this to work. They wanted Maxx Crosby to be on their team. They wanted to send 2 first-round picks to the Raiders for the rights of one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. They wanted it all to happen, and when it seemed like it was falling apart, they still tried to make it work. They just were not comfortable with the medical. They were not comfortable that the player they believed they were acquiring was going to be at a point where he could play to the level that they all thought.
That statement reveals something important. Baltimore wasn't casually exploring the idea of trading for Crosby. They were ready to pay a massive price. 2 first-round picks is the type of compensation teams only give up when they believe they're getting a difference maker. And Crosby absolutely fits that description. He's one of the most relentless edge rushers in the league, known for constant pressure, high motor, and the ability to disrupt even elite quarterbacks. For a defense already built around physicality and aggression, Crosby would have been a perfect fit. But just as the deal appeared to be heading toward the finish line, everything suddenly changed. Instead of finalizing the trade, Baltimore walked away. The explanation given inside league circles was simple: medical concerns. According to reports, Ravens doctors reviewed Maxx Crosby's knee following recent surgery and weren't comfortable moving forward. In the NFL, medical evaluations can absolutely kill a trade. Teams invest massive money and draft capital into star players, and if the health risk looks too high, deals can fall apart quickly. But here's where the situation becomes complicated. Because Crosby's surgery and recovery timeline weren't exactly a secret, teams knew about the meniscus repair. It had been documented from the start. That raises an uncomfortable question. If the injury was already known, why did the Ravens push negotiations this far before suddenly backing out? And that's where critics across the league started to react.
If I'm any other team, unless Lamar Jackson or Kyle Hamilton is on the trade block, I'm not even picking up the phone for the Baltimore Ravens. There's a lot of trust issues now with this organization. I'm not sure exactly how this could happen for a player of this magnitude. I have not seen it in my lifetime, especially not at this point in time.
The action highlights something bigger than just one failed trade. In the NFL, relationships between front offices matter. Teams negotiate constantly. If one organization is seen as unreliable during negotiations, it can damage trust across the league. And while Baltimore backed out of the deal, the Raiders had already been operating under the assumption that Crosby was leaving.
Yeah, the Ravens should really have to explain themselves. You know, the only people where we've heard from in this whole situation is the Raiders is saying that the trade didn't go through. The Raiders went through this whole offseason with the expectation that Maxx Crosby was not going to be there. You know, they wanted to make the deal happen. So they sent him to Baltimore. And so they went through the offseason. Also, they went and got Malcolm Kuntz. They retained him. They went and signed Kwity Paye. Like, you already went and signed 2 replacements for Maxx Crosby. And now he comes back and you were expecting to have 2 first-round picks.
Think about that for a moment. Las Vegas structured part of their offseason around the belief that Crosby was gone, they prepared for life without their best defensive player, and suddenly, the trade disappears and everything changes. Which brings us back to the central mystery. If Baltimore truly walked away because of medical concerns, then explain what happened just hours later. The moment the Maxx Crosby trade collapsed, many people assumed Baltimore would simply move on and look for another defensive option later in the offseason. Failed trades happen all the time in the NFL. Teams negotiate, something changes, and both sides walk away. Normally, the story ends there. But in this case, the story didn't end. In fact, it escalated. Because only hours after stepping away from a blockbuster deal for Maxx Crosby, the Baltimore Ravens made another massive move at the exact same position. Instead of trading for a superstar pass rusher, they suddenly signed one. And not just any contract, a 4-year deal worth $112 million. That player was Trey Hendrickson, one of the most productive edge rushers in the NFL over the last few seasons. The announcement shocked fans and analysts alike, not only because of the money involved, but because of how fast it happened. The timeline made people pause. Baltimore walked away from the Crosby trade, and within roughly 13 hours, another elite pass rusher appeared on their roster with a 9-figure contract. And the moment that news broke, the conversation around the league changed.
It is not hypothetical. It is real. The Baltimore Ravens have agreed to terms with Trey Hendrickson on a 4-year, $112 million deal. This is something that Hendrickson has been holding out for, this kind of money on a multi-year deal, the kind of security that he's wanted, the kind that a top edge can make. And he now lands with the Baltimore Ravens.
That announcement instantly reframed the entire situation, because now the timeline didn't just look like a failed trade, it looked like a pivot. To understand why this signing caused so much debate, it's important to look at the player Baltimore just committed $112 million to. Trey Hendrickson has been one of the league's most consistent pass rushers over the past several seasons. During his time with the Cincinnati Bengals, he built a reputation as a relentless edge defender who constantly pressures quarterbacks and finishes plays with sacks. His production speaks for itself. Multiple double-digit sack seasons, constant disruption in the backfield, and a motor that never seems to slow down. From a pure performance standpoint, Hendrickson is absolutely a player who can upgrade a defense, and that's why Baltimore's move wasn't automatically viewed as a mistake. On paper, replacing a potential Crosby trade with Hendrickson still gives the Ravens a dangerous pass rush presence, but the details are what made people start asking questions. Maxx Crosby is widely considered one of the top 3 edge rushers in football. He's younger, known for playing through injuries, and has been the centerpiece of the Raiders' defense for years. Hendrickson, while extremely productive, is typically seen as a tier below Crosby in terms of overall impact. So, the question naturally appeared, why negotiate aggressively for Crosby only to pivot to Hendrickson hours later? And that's where the explanation from Baltimore became critical. According to reports coming out of Baltimore, the reason the Ravens walked away from the Crosby trade was medical concern. Team doctors reportedly reviewed Crosby's knee following surgery and advised the front office not to move forward with the deal. Medical evaluations are a normal part of the NFL. Teams are extremely cautious when investing draft picks or massive contracts into players with recent injuries. If doctors believe the long-term risk is too high, front offices often have no choice but to walk away. That was the explanation Baltimore provided.
So let's make the natural connections here of how all the dots fit together. The Ravens told the Raiders this was a medical decision. Call off the Maxx Crosby trade based upon his knee. Baltimore has not commented publicly on that decision. I would certainly anticipate if and when they do, they will pin it strictly as a medical decision.
On the surface, that reasoning sounds logical, but critics quickly pointed out something uncomfortable. If medical risk was truly the deciding factor, why was Baltimore willing to negotiate so deeply for Crosby in the first place? Those same medical records didn't suddenly appear overnight. And more importantly, why pivot immediately to another massive pass rusher contract instead of slowing down and reevaluating the market? Those questions led analysts to suggest another possibility. Maybe the Ravens simply got cold feet.
But what really happened behind the scenes, let's call a spade, is that the Ravens, at the end of the day, got cold feet and changed their mind.
Man, this is the complete example of buyer's remorse. You traded for a Maxx Crosby, 2 first-round picks. You went and looked at his knee. You knew he had meniscus surgery. We knew this. This is nothing new. But then you saw, like Abinda said, you lost your center. You're losing players, and then Trey Hendrickson is still sitting on the market right there for the same price you could give a Maxx Crosby, but with 2 less first-round picks.
That explanation introduces a very different interpretation of events. Instead of a mysterious hidden strategy, maybe the Ravens simply reached the final stage of the Crosby trade and hesitated. Maybe the risk felt too high. Maybe the price was too steep. But when you place the timeline side by side, the situation still raises questions. One elite pass rusher deal collapses. Another elite pass rusher signs a $112 million contract, and the 2 events happen within the same day. Because if medical concerns were truly the problem, Baltimore just replaced one injured pass rusher with another. And once fans started connecting those dots, the conversation around the Ravens changed instantly. The moment the Trey Hendrickson contract became public, the reaction around the NFL exploded. Fans didn't just see a normal roster move, they saw a timeline that raised questions. Within minutes, discussions started spreading across X, Reddit, and NFL forums. The same theory kept appearing again and again. Baltimore may have used the Crosby negotiations as leverage. From the outside, the sequence looked suspicious. The Ravens spent days negotiating a blockbuster trade for Maxx Crosby, reportedly offering 2 first-round picks. The Raiders believed the deal was close enough to plan their offseason around Crosby leaving. Then suddenly, Baltimore backed out at the last second, citing medical concerns. And before the league even had time to process the collapse of that trade, a $112 million deal for another pass rusher appeared. Fans started asking the obvious question. Was Trey Hendrickson the real target all along? Some analysts pushed that idea further. They suggested that the Crosby talks may have helped Baltimore pressure the market, forcing other pass rush options to move faster or accept deals before free agency chaos began. In other words, the Ravens may have used the appearance of a blockbuster trade to create leverage behind the scenes. And even analysts who defended the Ravens admitted that the Hendrickson deal didn't completely silence the questions.
Signing Trey Hendrickson to a 4-year, $112 million deal 13 hours after the trade was called off will do very little to quiet some of the questions within the league about what the other circumstances were that led to the Crosby deal falling through. So for Trey Hendrickson, this is a windfall. As Ian said, this was the type of deal that he was hoping to get.
That statement captured the mood across the NFL media landscape. No one was accusing Baltimore of breaking rules. But many people agreed that the situation felt unusual because timing matters in this league, and the Ravens' timing created a mystery that fans immediately started trying to solve. While Baltimore moved forward with Hendrickson, the fallout in Las Vegas became another major part of the story. For the Raiders, this wasn't just a trade that didn't happen. It was a plan that had already started shaping their offseason decisions. Teams rarely negotiate a trade involving a franchise-level player unless both sides believe there is a real chance of completion. According to reports surrounding the situation, Las Vegas had reached the point where they expected Crosby to leave. The potential return of 2 first-round picks would have completely reshaped their roster-building strategy. Draft plans change when you gain extra picks. Free agency plans change when your best defensive player is expected to depart. Even locker room expectations change when a franchise star is about to move. Then, the trade disappeared. Suddenly, the Raiders found themselves back where they started, except the offseason had already moved forward. Players had been signed, roster moves had been made, and plans had shifted under the assumption that Crosby would not be part of the team's future. That's why this situation created tension beyond just one negotiation. It affected the direction of an entire roster. And when situations like this happen, other teams around the league pay attention. The NFL is competitive, but it's also a small circle when it comes to decision makers. General managers talk to each other constantly. Trades happen because relationships between front offices exist. Trust doesn't mean teams avoid competition, but it does mean negotiations rely on a certain level of honesty about intentions. When a trade collapses this late in the process, especially one involving a superstar player, people across the league notice. Executives remember how negotiations unfold. They remember which teams move quickly and which teams hesitate. They remember when a deal looks certain and suddenly disappears. In the NFL, front offices talk and reputations travel fast. That doesn't mean Baltimore did anything unethical. Trades fall apart for many reasons, especially when medical evaluations raise concerns. But when the same team that cancels a blockbuster trade signs another player at the same position just hours later, other executives naturally start asking questions. And those questions can affect future negotiations. There is also a simpler explanation that deserves attention. Maybe the Ravens truly believed Maxx Crosby's medical risk was too high. Maybe their doctors saw something in the knee evaluation that made the front office uncomfortable committing 2 first-round picks and a massive contract. In that scenario, walking away from the trade would be the responsible decision. Front offices are judged not only on bold moves, but also on avoiding dangerous ones. If Baltimore believed Crosby's long-term health was uncertain, pivoting quickly to Trey Hendrickson might simply have been the smartest available option. Hendrickson was a proven pass rusher who could immediately strengthen the defense without the same level of trade compensation required. Even then, analysts still warned that injuries are always a risk with edge rushers.
You request a trade and says, you guys don't want to hold me down. Look what I'm doing. I need security too. I need long term. Another year, another 17 and a half sacks. Then we saw the hold in 2025, which ends up, he has a 4-sack season last year because he only played in 7 games. He ends up getting hurt, has surgery, core muscle surgery. Hopefully he will be okay. So let's not hold our breath on this either.
That perspective highlights an important limitation in this story. Fans and analysts outside the building never see the full medical reports. The Ravens doctors had access to information the public does not, which means the real reason behind the decision may never be fully known. What makes this story fascinating isn't just the failed trade or the massive contract that followed. It's the timeline connecting both moves. The Ravens nearly completed one of the biggest defensive trades of the offseason. Then they backed out. Then they signed another elite pass rusher almost immediately. Each of those moves individually makes sense. Together, they create a mystery. Was this brilliant front office strategy or the shadiest negotiation tactic of the offseason? So what do you think happened here? Did the Ravens manipulate the offseason market, or did they simply protect themselves from a risky trade? Let me know your theory in the comments. And if you enjoy deep NFL investigations like this, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for more breakdowns.